Welcome to our course focusing on current cyber threats. This module will raise key points regarding who our enemy really is and will help you discover weaknesses in your computer system protection. How do you typically behave security-wise? What are the behavior patterns of system administrators and users? What does the consumerization of IT mean? What is apt? A term with military origins coined as a response to a shift in the computer system security landscape. Let's get started. The first module will focus on the concepts of cyber war, the consumerization of IT, and apt, the key aspects that have driven change as far as system security is concerned. Why is this loosely technical subject so important? It's because computer systems follow their own rules, and our ability to work with them is not innate and has to be learned. As you know, the systems we know today have all been developed in the past 20 or 30 years. Most of us have not been able to use them while growing up. This is an ability which has to be taught and learned. And it just so happens that we haven't yet had a good teacher. What's the result of this fallback? We're all perfectly aware of the rules that have to be followed to be safe and secure outside home or at work. We follow them intuitively. And at the same time, when it comes to virtual security or computer system security, we draw a blank regarding the same set of rules. Your goal is to discover and teach yourself and the users of your systems crucial aspects of computer security awareness. This is all the more important as, unlike in real life, breaking computer security rules won't cause an immediate reaction. If you run a red light, you will surely be noticed. This behavior is dangerous to both you and others, so action will come instantly. But if you do something equally silly in a virtual environment, in a computer system, the reaction will either be invisible or at least be delayed. It's harder to notice the cause and effect relationship between, let's say, visiting a suspicious website and your computer starting to work slower. This relationship is real though, and will be the subject of this course. There's also another aspect that explains why less technical modules are vital for this training. It's because users, the majority of people who work with computers like students, employees, and so on, use computers as a tool to accomplish simple goals. It's never a goal in itself to become a computer expert. In other words, getting to know computer systems mechanisms is only seen as important when it can be applied to everyday life, at work, or for entertainment. Security awareness is rarely a factor here. And this means that even the younger users who grew up with computers and computer networks still have the same rules to catch up on. They still have to learn security rules. Unfortunately, aside from us, the good guys, there are other people in the virtual environment, or the ecosystem as well. There are people who are there for their own gain, and their agenda can be counterproductive with our own. This business, or the cybercrime scene, is growing rapidly. Of course, cybercriminals have been with us ever since computers were developed. We'll take a look at that later. Recently, from the past 5 to 8 years, there's been quite a significant change in how these cybercriminals operate. Simply put, to be truly secure in all environments, whether it's the real or virtual world, you have to first know its basic security rules. As of now, you're not fully aware of them and you need to increase your knowledge. There are, however, other people out there that are extremely savvy with computer security. People who have tons of experience or have studied for years or simply make good use of the knowledge found on the internet. They can attempt to exploit for their own purposes our ignorance and carelessness and the fact that we're breaking basic security rules. And the problem is they're often successful in these attempts. Despite major security outlays and legislative proposals to reduce cybercrime, we, the lawful computer users, are losing the war against cybercrime. Why? Well, for starters, the statistics are against us. If you consider that there are 2 billion computer systems that have an internet connection, and rather optimistically assume that 99% of them are secured against basic threats and types of attacks, this still means that 20 million attacks per month will be successful. This translates into 240 million computers to get infected with malicious software each year. And remember, we're being very optimistic here. The numbers, by and large, are simply against us in this fight. Why don't we take a look at the past to get a better picture of all this? Let's start with prehistory. The Stone Age of computer systems is the 90s. During this era, we had Robert Morris, who became famous largely as the creator of the first widely spreading computer worm. The worm exploited software bugs in Unix services, in SendMail, and among others in RSH and RExec. The worm also attempted to crack weak passwords. Anyway, Morris himself claimed that he created the worm and released it on the net, the internet of those days, to measure its size. Each infected machine responded to the attacker, so Morris was able to determine the number of infected computers. To prevent the same machine from being infected multiple times, the worm used a mechanism that asked whether the computer already had a copy of the worm. If it responded yes, the computer would not be reinfected, which means that a progeny process of the worm would not be launched. This mechanism could have been easily subverted to stop the epidemic. It would have been enough to run, without analyzing the functioning of the virus, a program that responded with yes when asked whether the computer was infected. Or wouldn't it? Realizing that this could stop his attack, Robert Morris decided that 1 in 7 infected computers would be reinfected regardless of their answer. Morris apparently did not imagine what would be the scale of mass spreading of viruses. About 10% of Unix systems attached to the internet, roughly several thousand computers, were infected with the worm. And so the first attempt to gauge the size of the internet in the 90s ended up as the first global denial of service attack. Robert Morris, or someone who claimed to be Morris, then sent out an email which poked fun at common media belief, or should I use the word paranoia, which pictured cyber criminals, and I don't call them hackers for reasons I'll explain later, as people who, as you can see, could turn your computer into a bomb and detonate it remotely, killing you and your family. Robert Morris dutifully alerted his readers of a new type of virus, which was worse than anything yet found on the internet. A virus that distributed itself through power lines of 60 Hz by changing serial port pinouts and reversing the direction in which disks spin. Those among you who are a bit older may remember that computers used serial ports in the past. There are also silly hints on fighting the virus. First, don't attach your computer to a power line. Don't use batteries either. Batteries are rumored to be infected as well. Don't copy any files. Don't read any messages, including the one you're reading now. Don't use serial ports. Don't use modems. Modems are another relic of the past. They were used to connect your device to the internet. Don't use keyboards, screens, or printers. Don't use electricity and heating. You might say that an exaggerated media reaction triggered an exaggerated response from, well, let's call it the computer systems security experts movement. Time has shown, however, that this exaggerated reaction was unfortunately not so absurd after all. A few years pass and we're now at the turn of the 21st century. This period will be remembered as the days of the plagues. One such plague was Code Red, a worm that exploited a vulnerability in Microsoft web servers to deface affected websites. Notice how the main activity of the Morris worm and the worms we're now discussing spread themselves. This was their basic payload. They were released to breed and infect more and more machines. Damaging actions, if there were any, Code Red launched them about every 3 weeks, resulted in the defacement of some web pages. This was simply to manifest their presence. This is a crucial moment. This was the goal of the creators of these worms. Other than Code Red, this type of worm includes NIMDA. NIMDA is relevant to our analysis because it's a virus that distributed itself through a number of propagation techniques, by exploiting software errors, but also by social engineering, which we'll discuss later. What were the effects of the NIMDA outbreak? 2 million infected computers in just 3 days. While it would seem like an imposing feat, it was quickly surpassed by CLES, another mass-mailing virus which was released on the internet and went around the world in 2.5 hours. The record held by CLES was beaten by the SQL Slammer. The Slammer attacked vulnerabilities in the service of Microsoft SQL Server, a popular database system. The worm was so effective partially because it targeted computers through UDP. It took it about 10 minutes to infect 90% of vulnerable servers. In this time, the number of infected hosts doubled every 8.5 seconds. Even though UDP is a lightweight protocol with very small header and offers only minimal transport service, the outbreak has in fact resulted in internet outage. Banks had to shut down cash machine networks, and airlines had to cancel flights. Global communication was impeded or even blocked due to one virus that spread as fast as possible in the infrastructure of the day. If the infrastructure had been faster, the results would have been even more staggering. The past several years have been an era of cybercrime. This is the key point of interest for us. 2005 is a sort of threshold here, or it's usually considered as such because it's the year in which the Zotob virus spread. Zotob is lesser known than the worms we've discussed before, as it was not widely reported in the press and mass media. We know now that it was the first virus which was commissioned. In other words, it was written for money. Commissioning an order is not usually an exercise in charity. If you pay money for something, you expect your investment to pay off. The virus was commissioned to steal data from a specific company by installing a Trojan horse. Where did we start? We started with a joke, or with an outlet for Robert Morris's creativity, and we ended up with Zotob, a virus that no one even pretended to masquerade as a harmless program that measures the internet or anything of the sort. This was a worm created to make money. This marks a very significant shift for us. What are the consequences of this change? The first is that media is more reluctant to report on computer system security. Several years ago, before 2005, we the public were regularly fed with information on new global-scale virus outbreaks. Recently, there's a lot less stories or news on computer security in the media. Does it mean that we're generally more secure now? Or that people stopped writing viruses? Or perhaps systems nowadays have been safeguarded so that viruses can't spread? No, unfortunately not. Quite the opposite. Viruses nowadays aren't created for publicity. Coders who create viruses don't seek fame. They try to earn their bread. Writing viruses is now a job. This means that in recent years, from 2005 onward, is the time when big money entered the world of computer systems and changed it forever. This is by no means a revolutionary new era. Humans are social beings. This has always been our characteristic feature, something that makes humans stand out. And for every society, there have always been groups of people who break social rules and flout them for their own purposes. Think of the Wild West or the Prohibition era. The same scenario is seen in the world of computer systems. It would be really naive to think that the internet would somehow be exempt from the same criminal mechanisms that can be witnessed everywhere else. Crooks and outlaws existed from the beginning of history. Would they simply disappear now? Unfortunately, this is not the case. They seem to have found a niche for themselves, just like the rum runners of the Prohibition, and exploit it without remorse. What's even worse, they're becoming more and more effective. And this is the main reason why the security of computer systems is lately in decline instead of improving. 85% is an important number. This is the percentage of attacks which are vectored in ways that render your typical protection measures, such as antivirus scanners, software upgrades for both operating systems and installed applications, or constantly enabled firewalls, essentially useless. These attacks are performed either internally, locally, or through social engineering, tricks and techniques that manipulate people. In both cases, these attacks cannot be stopped by the protection measures I've just listed. 85 is also an important number for other reasons. The mentioned security measures, firewalls, updates, and scanners are all important. They should be enabled and supported on all systems. It's not true that they bring no real results. At the very least, you can pretend you're protected. Don't make yourself an easy target. Not having these protections is like leaving your car running with your keys in it in an unknown district. At least close the door. The risk of theft is still high, but at least you've done something to secure your resources. And don't get me wrong, I don't want you to get rid of your antivirus scanner. On the contrary, leave it enabled and updated often, even every day. The problem is that when cybercriminals decide that you have some valuable resources, or your system is for some other reason worth attacking, this scanner will fail 85% of the time. The first module of this course, which I invite you to take, will tell you above all which popular computer system security beliefs are actually myths. Myths that originated due to lack of knowledge, or laziness, customs, or from applying outdated information to new phenomena. It will also comment on security issues that stem from the rise of organized crime in cyberspace. Remember that there are companies set up in some countries which recruit programmers to create malicious code. Writing viruses has become a day job for some. From 9 to 5, these people sit in their cubicles and write code that you wouldn't want to come across in your systems. The module will also talk about cyber war and terrorism, two issues that have already become reality. We have already been able to witness some instances of cyber war. Another of our topics will be the consumerization of IT and how it affects security. Risks and threats will also be covered in this first module. We'll try to classify their types and discover why they affect virtually everyone. Unfortunately, if you think that you wouldn't be the target of attacks because your business is small scale, you only have 6 computers, your monthly turnover is not big, and you produce no new technologies, so there's really nothing to be stolen, think again. The real situation doesn't look so bright. The last issue will be covered in the point titled The Final Goal of Attacks, which explores the motives which current cybercriminals might have to attack you. See you in the training.